Hey guys, I want to talk to you a little bit about a substance called water. And we're going to talk about the water molecule itself, the shape of the water molecule, and the significance of that shape, and then why water is so important to living organisms. As you know already, water is very important to living things. We know that living cells are basically made out of almost all water. Huge percentage by mass of the components of the cell is water. The cells contain water, and living cells usually are surrounded by water. So let's take a look at the water molecule itself, the shape of it, and what that means to the chemical properties of it. So I'm going to attempt to draw a water molecule. Well, first I'll give you the formula here. So the formula of water is H2O, obviously. Everybody knows that. But another way to draw water would be like this. You can draw the oxygen here, and you can draw some covalent bonds leading to some hydrogen atoms like this. You can see that the hydrogen atoms are not coming out of the oxygen at opposite sides, sort of in a straight line. Instead, they're coming off on one side at this funny angle. And then a third way to draw water would be to draw the oxygen really big, like a big circle, because oxygen is a relatively large atom. And then the hydrogens are a very small atom, and they're at the one side like this, and it ends up looking kind of like the shape of Mickey Mouse's head. All right, so the fact that the hydrogens are not coming off at opposite ends in a straight line is really important, because what happens is with oxygen being a very electronegative atom, what ends up happening is that oxygen pulls the electrons from the hydrogens, sort of the electrons that are in between in this covalent bond. It pulls those electrons towards the chin of oxygen, or towards the oxygen atom altogether, which ends up making this down here a little bit more negative. The other end of the water molecule up here ends up being then slightly positive, because that's where the hydrogens are and they have less electrons. So if we take a look at a periodic table for just a second, see if I can get this to work here. On the periodic table, we have the metals over here on the left side. Okay, so on the left side we have the metals, and they are not very electronegative. That means they do not really like electrons and are very willing to give them up. Whereas on the right side we have the nonmetals, and these elements tend to be very electronegative. We ignore the noble gases in biology pretty much, because they don't really play a role in biological molecules or in living organisms. So basically for us here, the very right side of the periodic table ends here in this column at the halogens, starting with fluorine. So since as we go to the right, the elements become more electronegative, we end up finding out that fluorine is the most electronegative element of all of them. By the way, as you go up, they become more electronegative too. But fluorine is highly reactive and kind of poisonous and dangerous, and it's not really a big part of living organisms either. So there aren't really any biological molecules that have fluorine in them. So that leaves oxygen as the most electronegative atom or element in living organisms. So oxygen basically then loves electrons and pulls those electrons to it. So let's go back to our PowerPoint, and if I can figure this out here. So what's going to happen is that oxygen pulls those electrons, and it becomes slightly negative. So one way that we can show that charge is like this. Oopsie, let me fix that. One way that we can show that is we draw this again. We can draw a little Greek letter delta. There we go, that's a lowercase delta, and this end would be slightly negative, whereas this end up here would be slightly positive. Okay, so what that does then is it will cause water molecules to be sort of attracted to each other, because they have these opposite charges, because we know that opposite charges attract. So what ends up happening is that water molecules will orient themselves in a certain way towards each other. So where the ear end of the Mickey Mouse over here we said is slightly positive, it will orient itself to the chin end of another Mickey Mouse water molecule like this, which is then slightly negative. So the connection between these two molecules right here, this sort of attraction, we call that a hydrogen bond. That hydrogen bond is just simply the sort of attraction, the way they stick together, a kind of a sort of weak interaction, less strong than a covalent bond or an ionic bond, but still, strong enough to be somewhat significant. The fact that water is positive on one end and negative on the other end leads us to say that water is polar. So something that is polar just means it's different on opposite ends, kind of like the Earth. If we take a look at the Earth has a north pole on one end and a south pole on the other end. That's a magnetic pole. Here we're just talking about an electrical charge or a partial charge. All right. So this is a little bit more of an elegant diagram that shows this a little bit more nicely than what I was able to draw. And once again, here we have the lowercase Greek delta, partial negative charge right here, partial positive charge right here, and then the hydrogen bond that connects them. So the fact that water has these hydrogen bonds like this, that water forms these hydrogen bonds due to this polarity, gives water some really, really strange properties. And one of them we already mentioned, water molecules like to stick to each other. That's something that we call cohesion. And that's in the notes in just a second. Here we have 3 pairs of water molecules that are oriented in different positions, and some of them are correctly oriented and some of them are incorrect. And I'd like just take some time to look at those, maybe pause the video, take a look at those and try to figure out A, B, and C, which of these are lined up correctly and which of these would not work, and then also why. Why would they not work? Why would this, not be a reasonable image of these water molecules? And I hope you appreciate the artistry of the drawing. That's just the same thing. All right. So cohesion, we said, is water molecules sticking to each other. And then adhesion is when water molecules stick to other materials, something that's not water. And the way that happens is water can stick to other substances that also have positive and negative charges on them. Whether they're partial charges or full charges doesn't really matter. Water has the ability to stick to a lot of different types of things. And you've experienced this, that if you've maybe gotten wet walking around in the rain, your t-shirt sticks to your skin because the water in between makes it stick. I did run across this video over here that shows adhesion really well, and I'd just like you to watch it because I think you will learn what adhesion is all about from this. So this guy over here has a cup of water. He's got a piece of paper. Also, he appears to be eating something. I'm not sure what that's all about. So he puts the paper in the water. And voila, we have adhesion. Water sticking to something other than water.